Before the world adored him, before his name became synonymous with charm, wit, and silver screen confidence, George Clooney was just a boy facing an invisible battle. Born on May 6, 1961, to Nina Bruce, a former beauty queen and city councilwoman, and Nick Clooney, a television host and news anchor, George seemed destined for the spotlight. The Clooneys were steeped in art and media. His aunt was the legendary singer and actress Rosemary Clooney, and his lineage even connected him distantly to Abraham Lincoln. From the outside, his future appeared gilded: a loving family, a vibrant heritage, and opportunities that many could only dream of. But pain does not always announce itself loudly. At age 13, George was struck by Bell's palsy, a rare neurological disorder that paralyzed the left side of his face for nearly 9 months. For a boy entering adolescence, it was devastating. One eye would not close, one side of his mouth would not move. Mirrors became enemies, school hallways a gauntlet. Some classmates teased, others stared. The cruelty of youth, combined with his own embarrassment, carved wounds far deeper than the physical paralysis itself. Learning to laugh through pain. It was in this crucible of adolescence that Clooney discovered something powerful: humor as armor. If he could make people laugh before they mocked him, he could control the room. He leaned into self-deprecation, joking about his frozen face. "You learn to be funny to survive," he would later admit. That instinct, to smile through pain, to entertain instead of expose, became the earliest layer of the persona the world would later adore. Beneath the charm and wit of George Clooney lived the echo of a 7th grader wondering if he would ever look or feel normal again. As he recovered, Clooney redirected his energy into sports. By high school, he excelled in basketball and baseball, even trying out for the Cincinnati Reds in 1977. When he was cut in the first round, it was another wound, but he laughed it off, the same way he always had. After high school, Clooney took on ordinary jobs, cutting tobacco in Kentucky fields, selling insurance door to door, stocking shelves. There were no film sets, no red carpets, just long, hot days under the sun. Yet within those experiences, resilience took root. He learned how to carry failure without bitterness, how to adapt, and how to keep moving forward. Struggling in Hollywood's shadows. When Clooney first entered Hollywood, he did so not as a prodigy but as a persistent dreamer. His earliest years were a carousel of failed pilots, forgettable guest roles, and dashed hopes. From the 1978 miniseries Centennial to small parts in The Facts of Life, Baby Talk, and Bodies of Evidence, his face flickered briefly across screens but left little impact. At times, he relied on the kindness of friends, even sleeping in closets to scrape by. Fame did not open its doors easily. Clooney had to knock, again and again, often to silence. But he persisted. He was not driven by entitlement, but by quiet determination. Hollywood did not crown him. He forced his way in, one audition at a time. Breakthrough on ER. In 1994, after years of near misses, Clooney's persistence finally paid off. He was cast as Dr. Doug Ross on NBC's ER, a pediatrician equal parts suave and emotionally complex. The role transformed him almost overnight from struggling actor to primetime icon. Audiences were captivated. Women adored him. Men wanted to be him. For the first time, Clooney felt Hollywood's gaze settle firmly upon him. "That show saved me," he later reflected. "I was broke. I was almost out of chances. ER gave me everything." The newfound fame became a launchpad. Clooney began taking bold steps into film, determined not to be typecast as just a television star. Daring choices, painful lessons. Clooney's early film career was a mix of triumph and misstep. The gritty vampire thriller From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996, showcased a darker edge. Out of Sight, 1998, opposite Jennifer Lopez, displayed the slick sophistication that would become his hallmark. But Batman and Robin, 1997, widely panned by critics, taught him humility. Clooney later joked that he had killed the franchise. These experiences were formative. Each role sharpened his instincts. By 2001, he landed the part that seemed tailor-made, Danny Ocean in Steven Soderbergh's Ocean's 11. Smooth, charismatic, effortlessly in control, Danny Ocean felt like an extension of Clooney himself. The film's success spawned 2 sequels and cemented his status as a Hollywood heavyweight. Beyond stardom, the storyteller. But Clooney was never content to be just another handsome face. He sought out stories that carried weight. Films like Syriana, 2005, Michael Clayton, 2007, Good Night and Good Luck, 2005, and The Ides of March, 2011, revealed an actor with depth, intellect, and conscience. He ventured into directing and producing, co-founding Smokehouse Pictures with his longtime collaborator Grant Heslov. Together, they championed socially conscious cinema that questioned power, politics, and truth. The industry recognized his vision. Clooney earned 2 Academy Awards, Best Supporting Actor for Syriana and Best Picture as producer of Argo. Alongside multiple Golden Globes and BAFTAs, he secured his place not only as a star, but as a storyteller, an auteur, and a cultural voice in an era often dominated by spectacle. Pain behind the curtain. At what should have been the height of triumph, Clooney was nearly undone. In 2005, while filming Syriana, a stunt went horribly wrong. Thrown backward while tied to a chair, Clooney tore the dura membrane around his spinal cord. Spinal fluid leaked into his body, triggering blinding migraines, dizziness, and agony so relentless that he considered ending his life. You start to think in terms of, "I can't exist like this," he confessed in a later interview. Doctors struggled to identify the issue. Misdiagnoses, failed treatments, and weeks of unrelenting pain followed. For a man whose public image radiated control, being reduced to immobility was humiliating. "I was lying in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm, unable to move, and I thought, is this how it ends?" Eventually, surgery repaired the damage, but the road to recovery was long and uncertain. The ordeal left him shaken, but also transformed. He threw himself deeper into humanitarian work, lending his voice to causes in Darfur, South Sudan, and global human rights. Pain, he said, was the great equalizer. Success doesn't protect you from suffering. The injury stripped away vanity and left behind a raw humanity that reshaped his perspective on fame, purpose, and identity. Love and loss. While Hollywood celebrated his professional rise, Clooney's personal life carried its own scars. In 1984, before fame found him, Clooney met actress Talia Balsam. Confident, talented, and established, she seemed a perfect match. They married in 1989, swept up in youth and hope. But the marriage faltered. By 1993, they divorced, leaving Clooney convinced that matrimony was not for him. For years, he carried the reputation of Hollywood's most eligible bachelor, swearing he would never marry again. Yet life has a way of surprising even the most steadfast. In 2013, Clooney met Amal Clooney, a brilliant international human rights lawyer. Their connection was immediate, their bond undeniable. 2 years later, in 2014, Clooney broke his bachelor vow and married Amal in a Venetian ceremony that captivated the world. Together, they welcomed twins, Ella and Alexander, in 2017. With Amal, Clooney found not only love, but partnership, an anchor that gave his life new depth and purpose. The man behind the smile. For all his charm and success, George Clooney has never forgotten the seventh-grade boy who once avoided mirrors, afraid to be mocked. That boy taught him resilience, humor, and the importance of never taking the spotlight too seriously. Clooney has used his platform not just to entertain, but to advocate, raising awareness for humanitarian crises and speaking out on justice and equality. His legacy is not confined to Hollywood. It extends into the realms of activism and philanthropy. Hollywood's most eligible bachelor. The divorce reshaped Clooney's views on commitment. For over 2 decades afterward, he famously declared he would never marry again. His career soared, but his heart remained heavily guarded. By the mid-1990s, ER had turned him into a household name. Fame, fortune, and charisma placed him firmly at the center of Hollywood's spotlight. Twice crowned People's Sexiest Man Alive, Clooney became a global symbol of masculine charm and enviable independence. He dated a string of glamorous women: British model Lisa Snowdon, Italian actress Elisabetta Canalis, WWE star Stacy Keibler. Each romance captivated headlines, yet none lasted. On red carpets, Clooney dazzled. In interviews, he deflected questions of commitment with humor. To the public, he was the man who had it all: private villas, blockbuster films, a billion-dollar smile. But behind the curated image, he admitted to moments of quiet loneliness. In a rare moment of candor, he confessed, "There are nights when the silence is deafening. You wonder if success means anything without someone to share it with." It wasn't solitude, it was exile. A heart once broken had built walls too high to climb. Clooney played the role of Hollywood's eternal bachelor flawlessly, yet underneath the tuxedos and charm was a man haunted by the belief that perhaps true, lasting love wasn't meant for him. The quiet ache of belonging. As the years slipped by, Clooney's bachelorhood became as much a part of his brand as his acting talent. Interviews, late-night talk shows, and tabloid headlines leaned into the joke. George Clooney would never settle down. The irony was cruel. The freer he appeared, the lonelier he felt. For 2 decades, Clooney drifted through glittering affairs and glamorous events, searching for something he had almost convinced himself didn't exist. The image was enviable, a man with everything. But the truth was simpler and far more human. George Clooney had everything except the one thing he couldn't buy: belonging. Meeting Amal. The conversation that changed everything. In 2013, Clooney's life shifted in the most unexpected way. At his serene villa on Lake Como, a friend arrived with a guest. Her name was Amal Clooney, a brilliant international human rights lawyer. She wasn't from Hollywood, and she wasn't dazzled by fame. Amal carried herself with intellect, confidence, and elegance, qualities that immediately set her apart. She spoke passionately about justice, war crimes, and international law. Clooney, whose charm had disarmed the world, found himself speechless. Something stirred in him that night. "I didn't realize how unfulfilled my life was until I met Amal," he later confessed. For the first time in decades, the walls around his carefully guarded heart began to crack. Their connection blossomed quietly. They exchanged emails, thoughtful, witty, reflective. Clooney, known for breezy romances, suddenly found himself checking his inbox like a teenager. Their bond wasn't built on glamour but on shared ideals: late-night reflections, and a depth of honesty he hadn't known he was missing. The proposal that shook a bachelor's vow. A few months later, Clooney did something that shocked even himself. He bought a ring. Not for show, not for publicity, but because he couldn't imagine life without her. One evening, in the intimacy of his home, he got down on one knee. For a man who had sworn off marriage for over 2 decades, it was an extraordinary moment. Amal was stunned into silence. 20 long minutes passed before she said yes. Clooney later joked that he even planned how to blow out the candle if she refused. But she didn't. In that moment, George Clooney, Hollywood's most famous bachelor, felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the fleeting thrill of a new film or another award, but a soul-deep belief in the possibility of forever. Venice, a wedding for the ages. On September 27, 2014, the city of Venice transformed into something out of a dream. Gondolas glided along moonlit canals as Clooney prepared to marry the woman who had unraveled his bachelor's vow. The venue, Aman Canal Grande, a 16th-century Venetian palace, provided a setting of timeless elegance. Amal arrived in a custom Oscar de la Renta gown, her presence radiant and assured. Clooney, in a Giorgio Armani tuxedo, could not hide the awe in his eyes. The guest list reflected their two worlds colliding. Matt Damon, Cindy Crawford, Bill Murray, and Bono mingled with diplomats, human rights advocates, and Amal's legal colleagues. Officiated by Walter Veltroni, the former mayor of Rome, the ceremony was elegant and intimate. Clooney, known for humor and charm, turned tender. His voice trembled as he vowed to be Amal's partner, her friend, her family. Amal's vows brought tears to eyes hardened by fame. This was not a wedding for tabloids. It was a ceremony that reminded the world love is still sacred. For Clooney, it was not about spectacle. It was about finding home in another person. The man who once laughed off marriage had finally stopped running. Hollywood's eternal bachelor. For more than 2 decades, George Clooney seemed to embody the archetype of Hollywood's ultimate bachelor. His career flourished, his charm was effortless, and his reputation for wit and style made him one of the most desired men in the world. Twice crowned People magazine's sexiest man alive, Clooney was as famous for his romantic independence as he was for his roles in ER, Ocean's 11, and the countless films that cemented his status as a global star. He dated high-profile women, each relationship carefully dissected by the tabloids. There was British model Lisa Snowdon, Italian actress Elisabetta Canales, and WWE star Stacy Keibler. Each romance was followed by speculation of finally settling down, and each breakup only deepened the myth of Clooney as a man destined never to be tied down. But behind the tuxedos, red carpets, and glossy magazine covers was a man who occasionally confessed to a quieter, lonelier truth. In a rare, candid moment, he admitted, "There are nights when the silence is deafening. You wonder if success means anything without someone to share it with." To the world, he was enviable. To himself, he sometimes felt like a man isolated by his own myth. Still, Clooney buried those doubts in work. Roles poured in. Endorsements and investments in real estate grew his fortune. He would later co-found Casamigos Tequila, a venture that sold for $1 billion. Professionally, he was untouchable. Personally, the silence sometimes echoed too loudly. A chance encounter that changed everything. By 2013, Clooney had reached a place where few could surprise him. But at his beloved Villa Oleandra in Lake Como, Italy, he hosted a dinner that altered the trajectory of his life. Among the guests was Amal Alamuddin, a British-Lebanese human rights lawyer of remarkable intelligence and global respect. Unlike many who had crossed Clooney's path, Amal was unimpressed by celebrity. She didn't need Hollywood. She had built a career defending journalists, victims of war crimes, and dissidents silenced by governments. She moved easily through the worlds of law and diplomacy, carrying a grace that was matched only by her conviction. George, the man known for quick wit and endless charisma, found himself unusually quiet that evening. It wasn't her beauty alone that stunned him, it was the way she spoke, the way she seemed entirely uninterested in the fame that defined his life. The two began exchanging emails. What started as polite correspondence grew into witty exchanges, deep reflections, and a connection neither expected. Clooney, who had once breezed through romances with an air of detachment, found himself checking his inbox like a teenager waiting for a crush to respond. This was not about glamour or appearances. It was about finding someone whose values mirrored his own, someone who challenged him intellectually and emotionally. Building a life together. When George and Amal's relationship became public, it felt almost like a fairy tale. But behind the headlines and photographs was a very real partnership being carefully nurtured. Both carried demanding careers, George in Hollywood, Amal in international law, and both knew the toll distance could take. From the beginning, they made a pact, never to spend more than a week apart. It wasn't always easy. Missed calls, red-eye flights, and quiet nights in separate time zones were part of their reality. Yet, they held to it. Clooney admitted, "We make it work because she's worth it, every mile, every hour." To honor that commitment, George began reshaping his priorities. He became more selective with scripts, reduced directorial projects, and adjusted his calendar to prioritize family. Amal, too, found ways to balance her demanding schedule with their shared life. Together, they created sanctuaries across the world, Lake Como, Los Angeles, Berkshire in England, places where they could retreat, reconnect, and simply breathe. Their wedding in 2014, a lavish yet intimate event in Venice, captured global attention. Yet even then, their bond felt grounded not in spectacle, but in something sturdier: respect, admiration, and a shared vision of the life they wanted to build. A family of their own. In June 2017, George and Amal's world transformed again when they welcomed twins, Ella and Alexander. For Clooney, who had once joked that fatherhood wasn't for him, it was a revelation. Friends recall how the man once synonymous with bachelorhood became a devoted father overnight. He spoke often about diaper duty, late-night feedings, and lullabies, always with humor, but also with sincerity. "I didn't know how much more fulfilling life could be until I had kids," Clooney admitted. The twins not only reshaped his priorities, they redefined him. Clooney, who once lived for sets, premieres, and long stretches of location shoots, began turning down projects to stay closer to home. His focus shifted to designing safe, joyful environments for his children. At home, he child-proofed every corner, installed high-tech security, and committed to keeping his children away from the harsh glare of media intrusion. Fatherhood softened him. It humbled him. George laughed about being the old dad at school drop-offs, but his eyes betrayed something deeper: immense pride. The twins, who now speak fluent Italian, a language neither parent fully commands, delight in teasing their parents. Clooney often jokes that they conspire in Italian to outsmart him. For a man who once swore off family life, George Clooney found his greatest role not on camera, but in the quiet moments of fatherhood: bedtime stories, bike rides, pancakes, in the morning. A legacy beyond Hollywood. Today, George Clooney's life is one of intentional balance. At 64, he is no longer chasing the spotlight but choosing projects, causes, and moments that matter most. Professionally, he still acts and directs, though more selectively. In recent years, he starred in Ticket to Paradise alongside Julia Roberts and directed The Boys in the Boat, a film about resilience and teamwork. Each project is chosen with care, reflecting a man who values artistry over sheer fame. But perhaps more significant is his work beyond Hollywood. Alongside Amal, he co-founded the Clooney Foundation for Justice in 2016. Its mission, to advance justice in courtrooms, classrooms, and communities around the globe. Their flagship program, Trial Watch, monitors legal cases where governments use courts to silence journalists, activists, and minorities. Together, George and Amal have donated millions to support refugees, fund education in war-torn regions, and fight corruption. George has spoken at the United Nations, condemned authoritarian regimes, and stood up for global human rights. No longer just an actor lending his name to causes, he has become an advocate whose influence and resources genuinely move the needle. George Clooney today. Legacy and belonging. Looking at George Clooney's life today, the transformation is profound. The man once defined by bachelorhood, solitude, and red carpet appearances is now anchored in family, purpose, and love. His fortune, estimated between $500 and $600 million, is significant. Yet he has been deliberate in ensuring it becomes a tool for change, not excess. In interviews, he has made it clear that he wants his children to inherit values, not just wealth. His health remains a reminder of past struggles. Lingering pain from an onset injury during Syriana continues to limit him, but he has adjusted his lifestyle. He avoids intense travel, embraces a Mediterranean diet, cycles along Lake Como, and gardens with patience. He jokes about working out by loving life slowly, a reflection of a man who has finally found balance. At home, Clooney is not George Clooney the star, but George, the husband and father. He reads bedtime stories, helps with homework, and still occasionally surprises Amal with a meal he's cooked himself. Their marriage, though constantly scrutinized by tabloids, endures because it is built not on spectacle but on something rarer: partnership. "I thought I had everything," Clooney once said, "but playing with my kids every morning, that's the best part of my life." The proposal that stunned even him. Within months, George made a decision he had once sworn never to make again. He bought a ring. One evening, in the intimacy of his home, he got down on one knee. For 20 agonizing minutes, Amal was silent, processing the surprise. Clooney later joked that he even planned how to blow out the candle if she said no. But she didn't. She said yes. For Clooney, it was more than a proposal. It was hope restored, the belief that love and commitment could still be his, even after decades of convincing himself otherwise. A wedding for the ages. On September 27, 2014, Venice transformed into the backdrop for what many called the wedding of the decade. The ceremony was held at the Amman Canal Grande, a 16th-century palace overlooking the city's moonlit canals. Amal, radiant in a custom Oscar de la Renta gown, walked toward Clooney, who couldn't hide the awe in his eyes. The guest list reflected their two worlds: Hollywood stars like Matt Damon, Cindy Crawford, and Bill Murray mingled with diplomats, legal advocates, and human rights leaders. The ceremony, officiated by Walter Veltroni, the former mayor of Rome, was elegant yet understated. Clooney's vows were tender, his voice trembling slightly, while Amal's words moved even the most hardened guests to tears. For George, the man who once vowed never to marry again. This wasn't a spectacle. It was redemption. In that moment, he stopped running from love. Building a life-together marriage, however, is built on more than candlelight and champagne. Both George and Amal juggled demanding careers. He in Hollywood, she in global law. They often lived in different countries, but made a pact never to spend more than a week apart. "We make it work because she's worth it," George said. Clooney adjusted his career to prioritize family, choosing projects more carefully and reducing directorial commitments. Amal, too, found ways to bring her work closer to home. Together, they built sanctuaries in Lake Como, Los Angeles, and Berkshire, England. Each home became more than property. It was a promise to reconnect. Fatherhood at last. In June 2017, George Clooney entered the role he never thought he'd play: fatherhood. At 56, he and Amal welcomed twins, Ella and Alexander. "I didn't see myself as a father," Clooney admitted. "It wasn't that I didn't like kids, I just never imagined it for myself." But from the moment his children were born, everything changed. He traded red carpets for late-night feedings, movie sets for preschool drop-offs. Friends noted how he turned down major projects to stay closer to home, designing safe and private environments for his children. The twins became his anchor. He once joked that they conspire against us in Italian, a language neither he nor Amal speaks. Beneath the humor was a man transformed, softer, prouder, and deeply devoted. Health challenges and a shift in priorities. Clooney's life has not been without challenges. During the filming of Syriana, he suffered a serious spinal injury that caused a cerebrospinal fluid leak. The pain was so severe, he once admitted he considered ending his life. Though he has since recovered, he continues to live with limitations. Determined to maintain health, he embraced a Mediterranean lifestyle: bike rides, gardening, and cooking with his family. He rarely drinks, avoids smoking, and keeps life as balanced as possible. "I don't go to the gym," he quipped once. "I work out by loving life slowly." Legacy beyond Hollywood. Though his film career slowed, Clooney's impact remained immense. In 2022, he reunited with Julia Roberts in Ticket to Paradise, charming audiences once again. In 2023, he directed The Boys in the Boat, showcasing his talent for telling meaningful stories. His production company, Smokehouse Pictures, continues to develop socially relevant films. But perhaps Clooney's greatest legacy now lies beyond the screen. In 2016, he and Amal co-founded the Clooney Foundation for Justice, aimed at protecting human rights worldwide. Through initiatives like Trial Watch, the foundation monitors unjust trials and advocates for political prisoners and journalists. Their work has funded schools in war-torn regions, provided resources for refugees, and supported victims of oppression. George, once defined by bachelorhood, now stands alongside Amal as a partner in justice. He has spoken at the United Nations, testified at global summits, and used his platform to spotlight issues far from Hollywood. A different kind of fame. Despite his wealth, estimated between $500 million and $600 million, Clooney avoids the excesses of celebrity. The $2 billion sale of his tequila company, Casamigos, secured financial freedom, yet he remains grounded. "I don't want my kids growing up thinking money is the goal," he said. "I want them to inherit values, not just wealth." This philosophy defines his later years. He lives quietly, far from gossip headlines, cherishing mornings making pancakes with Ella and bike rides with Alexander. He stays off social media, rarely gives interviews, and spends most of his time in Lake Como or Berkshire, surrounded by family. A love and legacy that endures. At 64, George Clooney is no longer Hollywood's eternal bachelor. He is a husband, a father, an advocate, and a man at peace. The red carpets and flashing bulbs may have dimmed, but his life shines brighter than ever. What began as heartbreak in the 1990s became transformation in the 2000s and 10s. And today, his story is one of resilience, love, and purpose. Together, George and Amal remind the world that fame can be more than glamour. It can be used as a force for change. This isn't just the story of a movie star. It's the journey of a man who turned pain into purpose, solitude into family, and celebrity into service. And in doing so, George Clooney became not only one of Hollywood's most admired figures, but one of its most human